and I'll hit record in a second here. But today I wanted to talk a little bit about. There you go, record. Today I wanted to talk a little bit. Hey everyone. Today we wanted to talk where we left it yesterday. So we'll talk a little bit about how to brighten and add a little bit of edge and definition. And we talked about timpani. We saw a little bit horns, like this big 12 epic horn type of sound, how to add a little bit of edge and character to that with EQ, and then woodwinds a little bit, we'll see that. But I also wanted to focus, so just wrapping up with what we started yesterday that I couldn't finish, and then spending a little bit more of time when you have like a busy percussive track. You've got lots of percussion ensemble going on, and it's like maybe it ends up in a track like this or a stem like this. Most of the times I mix with the stems, and it is this one that I'm making a little bit bigger here. And it's like, it sounds good, but I wish I could make it sound a little bit more, gain a little bit clarity, clean this up a little bit, carve out some of those muddy frequencies and how to make it sound a little bit more, to gain some clarity. And I'm talking about this, something that sounds like this. And how to take it to a place that's more like this. And it's subtle, but we'll see this step by step. In fact, let's start with this, and then if we've got time, I'll show a little bit about how to brighten those woodwinds. And so let me just open this. So in my case, when I am mixing, I rarely mix my music the way Dennis shows in the course. We're like, okay, we're done composing. I'm gonna export everything, every single track. Just bypass the reverbs and any effect that you may have in any of your instruments or tracks. Export every single thing, like the 80 tracks, and then move them in a project like this, import them in a project like this, and then let's start mixing. I rarely do that. When I usually either have someone mix for me, or if I am mixing, I usually mix with the stems, because it's just, instead of having to mix 80 tracks, it's more like 12 or 20. And then a stem, basically what it is just a group of tracks. It's a way of grouping tracks. So I'll have the high staccato strings, the low staccato strings. I'll have, short brass, long brass, and things like these synths. Maybe I'll have the bass, high, mid, and low percussion. I'll end having between 12 and 20, maybe 30 stems max. And it's a way of mixing that it makes it a little bit easier. It cuts the time in half. You maybe don't have as much flexibility, but I've got everything that I need. Now, sometimes I'll end having something like this. If I don't plan things in advance, I'll have something that's busy like this. It's not much. Basically, it's just a combination of 3 different patches that ended in this low percussion stem. Basically, I have Damage Armageddon. I had some low taikos, and I had some low epic toms as well, and they ended in this track. If I had them separated, maybe I could have done a few more things. So the first thing, I'm gonna get rid of this for a second. It sounds like this. Let me just bypass the plugins. Alright, it's a typical kind of like epic percussion, nothing crazy. It's a very simple rhythmical pattern. Alright. Cool. How can we improve this? So we're gonna do 3 things. First, we're gonna get rid of a little bit of muddiness. Then we're gonna brighten it a little bit, but not with EQ, but with compression. I'll show that in a sec. And 3, we're gonna get rid, or we're gonna try to avoid or get rid of conflicting decays. So muddiness, brightness or clarity, conflicting decays. Those are the 3 things that are preventing for this to cut a little bit through the mix a little better to gain clarity. So let's get this started. So the first thing is cutting melodies. I'm gonna bring this here. Let's see what I've done. Okay, maybe we can make this. All right, there you go. Come on, there you go. So the first thing is cutting melodies. Is this guy here, percussion low? Can you see this? Yes. Sorry. So for this I used Fab Filter Pro Q3, which is an EQ. Sometimes you see me using different EQ. Usually I'll use either this one or the Eosis Air EQ. Sometimes I use the API 550. Sometimes I'll use which is an emulation of an API, and I like that for lower strings in general. Sometimes I'll use the Massive Passive. I like that for like a strings ensemble when I need to brighten them a little bit. Sometimes I'll use the Pull Tech, that for enhancing low frequencies. All those emulations, not this guy here. This is just like a digital EQ. Works great, sounds fantastic, very musical. I like that very much. All the other analog emulation EQs, they're nice, they look great, they sound great. I use them because they don't just EQ a little bit, but they color a little bit, and I like them in a specific, right? I like this one for cello, this one for ensemble strings, so I like this one for brass. But that is just like the 0.1 final percent of the sound. You can do the exact same. When you see me doing things with those EQ emulate, you can do the same thing with something like this, okay? And I would say Fab Filter Pro Q3, I use it 90 or 95% of the times. Or sometimes I use this one for finding how I should EQ it, and then I go ahead and use the analog emulation, just because the analog emulation is a little bit harder to use. It's not harder, but here it's like, okay, let me just find the frequency. Click, bring up, drag. It's like, okay, here, bring it down. Simple as that, right? With an analog EQ, you have to turn knobs just a little bit slower. All right, with that being said, what have we done here? Let's go one by one. But basically, I cut a little bit at around 88, cut a little bit at 250. This is gonna be the biggest one. And then I did a little bit of a space, because that big, massive, low percussion, it's not really the low percussion. It's not the lowest percussive instrument. It's not even the lowest instrument. It's not the real low instrument. I've got other low instruments. I'll have the punches, I'll have the hits, I'll have the sub bombs. Those instruments are the ones where I'm gonna have them provide the real low end. So that's one thing. And the other thing, switch camera. That we just recorded a video. I've got this one turned on, so maybe just use the other thing is the things like these where we've got, so it's continuously boom 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 boom, or double basses long notes. If you add if you've got like the LFE low end, kind of, if you enhance the low end in those instruments that are continuously there, it gets annoying. The subwoofer type of low frequencies that are so effective just for one hit in one specific moment in time. That is when it gets effective. But if it's there all the time, then it gets annoying. And we wanna avoid that. All right. So in this case, cut a little bit. So the first thing that I've done is cut a little bit, just to make a little bit of a space for the real low instruments. Let's see, I'm gonna bypass this. I'm gonna focus just on this and see the before and after. So without, sorry, there we go. With, you can see how it cuts a little bit, but here, so not much, like very subtle, meaningful when you put them all together. When you cut a little bit of many of the instruments, then it does make a difference. Just for one of them, not that big of a difference. So in the past, I was talking to Noah yesterday. In the past, I would be a little bit more aggressive, and I would do things like this, and not 12 dBs, but rather more like 36 dBs per octave. Like, if you want to go this way, I think it's perfectly fine. I don't think it's that big of a deal. It doesn't make that big of a difference. sonically for that specific instrument, you're clearing a little bit more of the space. Lately, I'm going. I've always been subtle in general when EQing, when adding reverb, when compressing, but especially after creating the Dennis course, I went a little bit more subtle, and I put more focus on the things that go before the effects, the balance and the panning, and that's where I focus most of the time. In fact, I'll talk about that in a second. But I'm gonna get rid of this one now. So cut a little bit here to make a little bit of space, and then this one. So without, with. Oh, this one makes a big difference. I'm gonna enhance it so you can see where we are. It's this guy. See, now I'm cutting too much, but so you can see the difference more obviously. That is the exact. I think it's sort of like the exact same frequency that we had yesterday for a timpani. Sort of like it's sort of like it cleans the sound a little bit, but also it cleans the tail. So like the room sound, you can see how all that room that we hear after the hit, we are cleaning that area. We're carving out those frequencies, are being effective for sort of like the reverb tail, the room tail after the hit, and that helps a lot because because many times epic percussion, when we've got like this powerful and well mixed and well balanced, all the orchestral melodic instruments with the epic aggressive percussion bed that has the right amount of presence, it's not that wet. It doesn't have that much reverb. It's quite clean. It's quite in your face, and so this actually helps. Carving out a little bit in that 250 cycles range, it helps not just it doesn't just affect the sound, the hit, but also the room, the ambient, the reverb sound after the hit. All right, and then we've got a little bit here, just because I felt that I needed a little bit here, but this is a little bit more subtle. Let me just bring this up at -2.7, which is where it was, and it was kind of like 250 to 44. Here you go. And finally, this one. Without, with, and here's where we're working here. See? And here's that sort of like the low rumble, the boominess of part of the sound. Sometimes I bring up that frequency, the 80, the 100, and then I cut right after that at 250, just to enhance the bottom end of the instrument, and then right after that cut the muddiness part of the instrument. I sometimes do that. In this case though, there was too much. It was a little bit of a frequency stacking in that area, and I wanted to cut. Plus, it's not the real low instrument, the percussion side of things, so I cut this a little bit. Now, when you've got two cuts that are so close at 80 and 250, what I generally do is I narrow them a little bit. Instead of leaving them like this, I narrow them a little bit because they are too close. Like if we've got one cut at 80, another one on 2.5K, 2500 cycles, no problem. But when they are too close, sometimes I narrow them a little bit. I did not narrow this one. I left it like a little bit more like this. I narrowed it a little bit, but this one I did narrow it a little bit more. That's sort of like what I had. Oops. All right. So before, after. And it sounds a little bit thinner. And I've said this many times, it's a good type of thinner sound. We don't always need the biggest sound. It's a little bit thinner, good type of thin. Because then we've got a lot going on. And we've talked about this many times. Space is not infinite. We've got to position the instruments. There are so sometimes we have to get rid of some frequencies or the space. So you get the point. So it's a good type of thin. All right, before we move on, where is this? Here. All right, so let's take a look at here. Now, so this is how I pan this instrument. Before the panning, after the panning. Before, after. Now, without context, I'll give you context in a second. Without context, to me, it sounds better without panning. It sounds bigger, it sounds wider, and because it sounds wider, it feels like it has more space for the detail of each instrument, to hear the detail of each, to hear the detail of each instrument in that ensemble type of track that we've got here. So initially it's like, now in context. Before panning. Before. So don't try to just focus. So what you're gonna hear is first, without panning, it uses more space. It's fine for the percussion. It's fine for this patch, but when I close it a little bit and I switch the panning, that's why it's orange. This originally was more like this. Exactly, like this. Where is it? Over here. And then I flip the panning. It's this guy here, low perk here. Originally it was like this, all the way. And then I flip the panning like this. Because the dominant channel, I wanted to move it a little bit more towards the right side. And the dominant channel was here. To the left side, I wanted it here. Now, one more time, just without. With. So what happens when I close a little bit the panning, the stereo panning, is that all the time we can hear a little bit more of the other instruments. First, it's going to balance better with the horns, that we don't hear them that much, but then they go up and then it balances a little bit better. And second, we're gonna be able to hear the lower strings a little bit more, because the lower strings reside in the same spot where the low percussion is, but it's a little bit wider. The lowest string, my lowest strings are these guys here. And this guy here. And as you can see, they're a little bit wider. It's like 100% left, 100% right. And this, the percussion, it's 36. Minus 67. And so it's right, but not 100%. And so by closing that a little bit and putting it in that place, it's gonna compensate better with the horns, and we're gonna hear a little bit more of the low strings. So before, after. I'll move this side. And that also compensates better with the high percussion. High percussion is this guy here. With the low percussion. And then it just compensates. If I bypass the panning of this one and the panning of this one, let me just select it so I can do this in one click. Bypass, okay. Without panning. It's wider, it's bigger, but we don't see the different elements. If I pan these things, without panning, with panning, without, with. And now everything in context, with the percussion not panned, panned. See how the difference is subtle in terms of percussion, but the way that you hear the rest of the instruments, you can hear them a little bit better because we've created a little bit of a space. And that makes a way bigger difference than EQing or anything like that. Like balance and panning, it makes a bigger difference, and then EQing, reverb, compression, all these other things. One more time, and then we move on. Without panning. With panning. And this is what makes the biggest difference when we are mixing our music in our studio. Everything sounds good because we are making it sound good for that space, for that playback system, the speakers or headphones, whatever. Headphones is even worse when you go and listen to your music in your car. But when we're in the studio, everything sounds great because we're making it sound great for that space, with that room, for those acoustics and the speakers and all that. But then when we go somewhere else, it sounds different, as you know, right? It's like, why does it sound different? The thing that makes the biggest difference in terms of making your sound, make it sound consistent across different playback systems, is how much space can you create for, how much space can you create in your mix so everything sounds clear? Because usually what happens is that when we are here and then we play back this mix in our car, what happens is that playback system is not a full range playback system. Plus, the speakers are not pointed the same way. Basically, what's happening when we are listening in some other playback system or AirPods is that it has a lack of something. It can't reproduce the higher frequencies, or it's not good at the mid-range, or some of the speakers are not pointed the right way, so we are not hearing the high frequencies, or it's not a three-way or it's not a two-way speaker, so it's more the type of sound is more blurry out of those speakers, and those things that are. If you're not making your mix sound super clear in your studio, then everything else is gonna sound blurrier, more muddy in general. So the things that are making our mix to sound the best is first a good balance, second a good panning. That's what's gonna separate the instruments the most. Because just imagine if you've got an instrument that takes all the entire space from left to right. Just by closing it a little bit, you're gaining so much. Like my percussion, it's always closed at minus 70, like plus minus 75. Vroom. My strings is the only instrument. The strings is the only instrument that are open. This is the most important instrument in the orchestra. Usually the strings are the only instrument that I allow to go like 100%. I actually open them a little bit more with S1. So I'm gonna, for the staccato strings that we love so much, staccato high strings that we love so much, that's the typical first thing that we're gonna miss, that we're gonna lose when listening it back in a different playback system. And it's like, oh, where are my staccato strings? We have to create a space for that. Anyway, panning, super important, super effective. Don't forget about it. And if you see, like the other day, Molly mentioned this in the group. Like the question was, but the question is not the important part. It's the thing that's behind the thing. The question was, Mark, what libraries? So in Denison's course, the action part, Mark's cues. Dennis is all the times like, the library sounds good, the sample is good, I'm just gonna pan it a little bit, I don't need to add any EQ or any reverb, let's just move on. That's sort of like 80%. It's like, sounds good, we're gonna pan it, no reverb, no EQ, let's move on. And she was like, what libraries did you use? I just want to use the same library, so I have to just pan and that's it. The thing behind the thing, what's important to me is like, panning is the first thing and the most important thing. And that's what makes the biggest difference. After a good composition, using good libraries and good balance, then it's panning. That's how important panning is. It makes the biggest difference. All right, let's continue. So we've done EQ, we've done panning, we've done EQ, and then the next step is going to be a little bit of, there's this guy, without. Let's do this. Without, with, without, with. It's a little bit of a richer sound. It's a little bit bigger, adds a little bit of size. I always say it's all these words, but at the end, it just sounds a little bit better. It's more pleasant. It's a little bit of character. One more time. I like this guy for percussion. The only thing that I'm gonna say about this one is careful with the flux. Flux is great. It adds this is super obvious the way. But basically, it just adds tape saturation in a very subtle way or in a very obvious way. It's very pleasant, so be careful. And it works like this. more. It's just super pleasant. You can see all the saturation going on. Without, you'll see clarity now. Saturation coming in. You can, at the almost distortion, the saturation. Without. With. But it's so pleasant. It's a saturation in a way that makes it sound epic, but careful though, because it feels pleasant. Then you add a little bit more and a little bit more, and then it's too much. That's what's happening here. So just I love this plugin. It's from Waves. It's always on sale. It's not that expensive when it's on sale. I think it's $37, something like this. Sounds great. It's very pleasant. But just be careful with this flux part here. Alright, so brightens the sound a little, just a tad. Makes it sound a little bit richer, adds character, adds size, makes it sound a little bit wider. All these things that make the sound make it sound a little bit more pleasant. But that's not adds a little bit. What I want to talk about is about this compression. It looks fancy, but again, I use this one because I like it for percussion. It's easy to use, but you could use any other multiband compression. You could use something like multiband. Here you go. So this Fab filter just create 3 bands, 1, 2, and 3, and that's it. This is the exact same thing at 166, and the other one is at 3.3, something like this. This guy here and this guy here now are doing the same, are potentially can do the same thing. I'm gonna go with this one because it's the one that I've got configured, but you don't have to use this one. This is the Lindell 354E, and basically it's from Plugin Alliance. This card, and basically this is what it's doing. Let's take a look. I'm gonna activate it. All right, so if you look here, here, and here, you'll see how it's compressing each one of the bands. So it's a low percussion ensemble. It's low percussion, but we also have information in the high, mid, and low ranges. And this is what we've got set up here. This is the low range, mid range, and high range. This goes from sort of like 20 hertz to 166. This goes from 166 to 3.3 K, so 3,300 cycles. And this goes from 3,300 to above. And so it's configured in a way that has sort of a fast attack, as you can see, 2 milliseconds. It has a fast release, as fast as it can go, 100 milliseconds. The threshold is set so it compresses a tad, just a tiny bit, as you can see. Just like 1 dB, maybe 2 at some like the loudest part. 1, 1.5, and 1.5. So it's just adjust the threshold a little bit. And then for the gain, there are 2 options. You can leave it in auto, which is down here, or you can bring it up a little bit. So this is not in auto. This is like 0.5 dBs up. Now this one, if you look carefully, this is more like maybe like 1 dB up, dB and a half, and this is more like 2 dBs maybe, something like this. So basically what's happening is that we're compressing each band, but we're bringing up the mid frequencies at that, and then the high frequencies a little bit more, while keeping the low frequencies compressing 1, 2 dBs, and not bringing them up. And so in a way we are EQing. It's a very broad EQ where we are enhancing a little bit of the high frequencies and a tad of the mid frequencies, but in a very organic way. It's an EQ that we're bringing up those frequencies, but the compression is also making it fluctuate. So it's a very organic type of EQ. The difference, the before and after, you'll see what you'll notice is, yes, it's gonna sound brighter when I activate the EQ, but also it's gonna gain a little bit of intensity. So without, with, subtle. Let's make it super obvious. I'm gonna bring this up like this. Without, with, without, with. right, so that's what it's doing. We're doing this in a very subtle way. I'm gonna leave it like this, without, one more time. Without, with. So very subtle. And so far, we've got this guy here, without any of the effects. So bypassing this one, with the effects, no effects. All right, so far, we've gained a little bit of brightness and presence. What time is it? Oh, Esteban's gonna kill me. Just one more thing, and then we're gonna go. Maybe we can do one tomorrow, Esteban, just for questions? Yes? Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, and so I'm gonna finish this up with, and I'll do the Woodwinds brightening tomorrow. Okay, this last part is gonna take me just 3 minutes, super important. Cleaning conflicting decays. Sometimes this is the exact problem with EQ, carved out some of the MIDI frequencies, we've compressed a little bit, it's a typical thing to do, plus we've brightened a little bit of the higher frequencies, mid frequencies. But the biggest problem, the something that makes a biggest difference, is sort of like panning. That's gonna make the biggest difference. The problem when we've got a busy percussion bed is conflicting decays. Conflicting decays, we have this hit, boom, decay, because, well, it's the ringing out, it's the room, it's the decay of that hit. And while we've got that decay, maybe we have the second hit. The end of the decay is conflicting a little bit with the next hit, and the more we have, the more conflicting decays. The decays are making the sound not sound clear, they're not helping, are making it sound more epic, but the more we've got, the more they conflict, the less clarity in the sound. So that's called conflicting decays, and that's something that is very problematic. And there are different ways of solving that. The first is when you are composing, making sure that the decay is as fast as possible. So there are libraries where you can control the amount of room, the room sound that you have, the less room sound that you have, the faster the decay. And there are some libraries that you can control the tightness of the decay, how fast the decay goes, and you can artificially control the decay of that sample. You can do things like that. You can use instruments that have a faster decay. So you can control all that. You can, if it's the end of a phrase, you can bring it about, artificially with expression or with volume. You can just cut that decay. If it's just one hit, it's a timpani hit, you can cut each one of the hits if you want it, because you're building this non-orchestral, more like hybrid type of percussion. You can do all these things when you're composing. If you are done composing, you are mixing. It sucks. You have what you have, and you have to fix it. Two ways of fixing it: the aggressive way, but you'll see many mixers with that. Just chop it. Just go ahead and chop it. Where is it? Percussion. There you go. Just literally chop it. So this is me chopping this part. And this part I'm chopping. Yeah, if I would do it like this, it would be too much. And you're like, ah, man, no, like, no way. When you put this in context, you don't even hear it. And let's just make this big. Like, it's not noticeable now that I've showed you like the before and after. But for someone that's listening to this for the first time, it's like, okay, this is the way it sounds. So let's just compare for a second. And this is the one that is not chopped. So it's not better or worse, just two different things. But if you need a little bit more clarity, this is the most effective way. All right, so this is one way. The other way, this takes a little bit longer, obviously. The other way is just, well, hey, here's what we've got. Pa-pam, 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 pa-pam. Okay, I'm gonna enhance those moments, and I'm gonna bring down the volume for the other moments. You can do this by hand, or you can do this on the fly. Just activate right, find the track, and here you go. 1, 2, 3. That's it, right? Just a little bit more subtle. That's the way I did it at the end. But just to demonstrate, just basically I'm pa-pam, pa-pam, and just bringing down the volume for, hiding those decays a little bit. So noisy. That's it. It's not perfect. I would like to, there's a hit here that I would like to enhance a little bit more here. So, you know, like this. But that's it. And that is what makes the biggest difference. So without all this and the plugins, it sounds like this. And with the plugins and this guy back. Subtle but meaningful, and that for a busy mix where you have to mix all the orchestral melodic, the orchestral percussion, the epic percussion, the synth percussion, the synths and all the pulses and all that, makes a big difference. Not when you're in the studio because you can hear everything perfectly, but when you are listening to this in a crappy AirPods and you're like, and you want to hear the important elements. That's it. End of the class.
Okay.
Esteban,
I'm still here
now, right?
I'm still here.
Still here. Esteban, one day, Esteban has a red button and it's like this. All right. Cool.
I cannot unplug the
chat.
the chat.
All right.
Until now, you know. Okay.
Is there any quick questions, Esteban, that we can do? Or?
No quick questions. There are questions, but if you want to answer tomorrow, it would be better.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay.
We'll answer them tomorrow. All right. Cool. Fantastic. Well, hey, sorry for taking a little bit longer. Thanks for being here. What we'll do is we'll do a class tomorrow. It wasn't planned, but let's do a class tomorrow just for Q&A. Sort of like more relaxed, just hang out and chat and Q&A and discuss things. Let's do that tomorrow. Okay, same time.
Perfect.
All right.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, guys.
Bye bye.
Have a good one. All right. Talk soon. Bye bye, guys.